Hi friends, welcome back to Parnika tutorials. In this video, I want to discuss what is ES7 React snippets extension, how can you install it, and how this extension is useful for to save your time in coding, and then I will discuss in detail about the setState method in React. So I sincerely request everyone to watch the complete video for better understanding. First, let me discuss how can you install the ES7 React snippets extension. To do that one, let me go to the Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, you can see there are three dots, which is additional views. Click on that one. Then you can see extensions. Let me click on the extensions. Then you should have the internet to install this extension. You need to type ES7 React. Then you can see ES7 React Redux GraphicQL React Native Snippets. Click on this install button. None, it is installing. Now this extension has been successfully installed for you. What is the use of this extension is, it is very useful and save lot of time in coding. To make you understand how this extension is useful for you to save lot of time in coding, in components, I will create the new file and I will keep the name as counterex.js. So let me write counterex.js. In counterex.js, I want to create a class component with this snippet. So what I have to do is that I just need to type RCE and press the tab. Now you can see we got the entire code for a class component. And what is the name of the class component? CounterEX, which is the name of the JavaScript file. Previously, if you observe, we have written the entire code, but with the help of this ES7 React snippets and just given a command called RCE and I have tapped, then we got the entire class component. So that is the use of ES7 React snippets. So it will be very useful and save lot of time in coding. Now I will discuss in detail about the setState method in React. To make you understand the setState method in React, what I will do is that in the counterex.js only, I will write the entire code. And what is the scenario is, initially I will take one count variable and I will initialize to 0. And I will have one button called increment. Once the user clicks on that increment button, the count value should be increased by 1. If I click once more, then count value should become 2. Then next time the count value should become 3. Like that, whenever user is clicking that button, I should increase the count value by 1. This is the scenario I want to do. In the div tag, I will give the h1 tag. Let me increase the font size so that it will be clear for you. And then I will write count. And in the app.js, I will import the counterex.js. So I will write here import counterex from components, and then here I need to give counterex, and then instead of state ex I need to give the self closing tag called counterex, where counterex is a class component in the counterex.js file. Now let me save this program and go to the new terminal, and then I need to type cd example1 and then I will give npm start. Now you can see we got the output as count. But what I want to do, I want to initialize the value to 0 and then I want to have a button called increment. Once the user clicks on that button, the count value should be increased. So to do that one, I need to have a count stat to keep track of the counter value, and we need to initialize the state in the constructor. I need to have the constructor. In the constructor, I need to initialize the value as 0. So what I need to do in the counterex.js, if you observe here, we have only one class. That class only I am exporting by default. So here I can remove the export statement and also I need to type R construct to have a constructor. I just need to type R const and I need to provide the tab. Then you can see that we got the constructor. In this dot state, I need to have a property called count, and then I need to initialize the value as 0. So I will have one property called count and I will initialize to 0. We need to bind the state value with the render method. In the render method, I will give count and then I will open the curly braces and then I will provide this dot state dot count. Let me close the curly braces. Then let me save this one. I want to have a button called increment, and whenever the user clicks on that button, the value should be incremented by 1. If you want to observe what will be the output till now, let me go to the browser and show it for you. We got the count value initial to 0. Then what I need to do, I need to have a button called increment. Once the user clicks on that button, the count value should be incremented. To do that one, first I need to have a button. Here I will have a button tag and then I will give on click event, and let me provide one arrow function. So I will use the arrow operator and then I will call the method called increment. On top of the button, I want to display a statement called increment. Let me save this one and you can see we got a button called increment. If the user clicks on the increment button, then value should be incremented. But if you see the code here, if user clicks on this button, we are calling the increment method. We need to define this increment method. In between the constructor and render method, I need to define the increment method. Let me open the curly braces and then I can write as this dot set state. In the last video already I have discussed about the set state. You need to open the curly braces and then you need to use the property called count, and then you need to write this dot state dot count is the property. For that one you need to increase the value by 1. So that's why I have written plus 1. After that what you need to do, you need to display the value which is there in the count property. So I need to write console.log and then you need to use this dot state and the property name count. Let me save this program, go to the browser. Initially the count value is 0. If user clicks on this increment button, now you can see the count value became 1. Again if I click it, the count value became 2. Again if I click it, the count value became 3. However, some people try to write the increment method in different way. What they will do is that, as I want to increment the count value by 1, instead of using the set state, what they generally do is that they will write this dot state dot count. For that one, what I need to do, I need to increment the value. So they will write this dot state dot count plus 1. So they will think that in the count the value is 0. If I increment by 1 and assign to the count, the value will be increased. In Python or C, what you will do, suppose let's take that C is having the value 0. Now if you want to increment the C value, what you will do, C is equal to C plus 1 you will do. So the same way I have written here. Initially the count property I have initialized to 0. Now I want to increment by 1 and assign to the count property. So that's why I have written this dot state dot count is equal to this dot state dot count plus 1, and then I want to display the value. So what I need to do, I need to write console.log this dot state dot count. Now let me save this program, go to the browser. Now initially the count value is 0. If I click on increment, the count value is not increasing. To verify what is happening, I will right click and click on insert. Then let me click on console. Now you got 0, 1, 2, 1 like this. Again, let me click. Then you got 2 here. Let me click again. You got 3 here. So if you observe, the UI is not re-rendering whenever the state is changing. So if you click on the increment button, in the console the value is getting incremented by 1, but the same is not reflecting on the user interface. Why it is? The user interface is not re-rendering whenever the state is changing. So you need to always use the setState method, never modify the state directly. So here what we are trying to do, we are modifying the state directly. So how we are doing? This dot state dot count is equal to this dot state dot count plus 1. We are trying to modify the state directly. That's why the UI is not re-rendering whenever the state is changing. So what you need to do is that, as earlier we have written, the same way we should write. So what you need to do, you need to use the setState method. Let me press Ctrl Z multiple times. Now this code will work. That is what we have used the setState method. If you want to observe, let me go to the browser. Let me refresh it again. The count value is 0. Let me close this one and click on increment. You got the value as 1. Let me again click on increment. You got the value 2. Let me click on increment button again. You got the value 3. So always make use of setState method. Never modify the state directly. This is very important point. Let me refresh it again. Then let me click on this one, insert. Now you can observe the console. Let me click on the increment. Here the value is 1, however the value here is 0. If you want to observe, let me zoom it. Here you got the value as 0. Again let me click on the increment. Here the value is 2, but in the console it is giving as 1 for you. Let me click again on the increment button. Here the count value is 3, but however here it is 2. So you can observe with setState method in the browser, you can see that whenever we click on the increment, the value is incremented by 1. First time when I have clicked, the value is 1. However, if you look at the console, the value is 0. So this is happening because the setState are asynchronous. If you observe here, the console value is 1 less than the rendered value. In the rendered, you are getting 0 first time, but however in the user interface, you are getting the value as 1. Next time in the user interface, you got the value 2, but however in the console, you got the value 1. So the console value is 1 less than the rendered value. It is due to the calls to setState are asynchronous. So console.log is being called before the state is actually set. Many times in your application, you might want to execute some code only after the state has been updated. To handle such a situation, you can pass in a callback function as the second parameter to the setState method. So the setState method has two parameters. The first parameter is the state object and the second parameter is the call by function. The call by function will be an arrow function. I will provide the second parameter, which is a call by function. If you observe here, the setState method we have provided only one parameter. We can provide the second parameter also. What is the second parameter? The second parameter is a call by function, which will be an arrow function. Let me provide the arrow operator, and then I can open the curly braces, and then I can write console.log, and then I can write callback value, comma, and then I will write this dot state dot count. Then you can observe console.log dot this dot state dot count. Let me save this one, go to the browser and let me refresh it. Initially the count value is 0. If I click on increment, then callback value is 1 and the count value is also 1. Let me click again on the increment button. Now you can see callback value 2 and the count value is also 2. So now it is working absolutely fine. Remember the second important point. Code has to be executed after the state has been updated. Place that code in the callback function, which is the second parameter in the setState method. SetState method, we already have the first parameter, which is the state object, and the second parameter is the callback function. So whenever the code has to be executed after the state has been updated, please place the code in the callback function, which is the second parameter in the setState method. Now let me create a new method called 5increment. Before the render method, I will create one more method called 5increment. Let me write 5increment, and then I will open the curly braces, and then I will call the increment method 5 times. So I will write this dot increment, again I will write this dot increment, and again let me copy this dot increment statement and paste it here. Again let me paste it here. So we have called 6 times, however I want to call only 5 times. Let me delete this part. I have defined a method called 5increment. In the 5increment method, I have called the increment method 5 times. Whenever the user clicks on the increment button, I need to call this 5increment method. So on click is an event. In that event, I should write this dot 5increment. So whenever the user clicks on the increment button, the count value should be incremented by 5. So initially the count value is 0. Once you click on the increment button, the value should become 5. Let me see will it working or not. Let me go to the browser and let me refresh it for you. Let me close this one. Now let me click on the increment button. The count value is incremented by 1 only, but what we want, the count value should be incremented by 5. Let me again click on the increment button. Again the count value is incremented by 1 and we got the 2. Let me again click on the increment button. We got the value 3. But what we are expecting, every time the count value should be incremented by 5, but it is not happening because React may group multiple set calls to single update for better performance. In our scenario, all the 5 setState calls are done in single go, and the updated value does not carry over between the different calls. So whenever you have to update the state based on the previous state, we need to pass a function as an argument to setState method. This is very important. Why we are facing this issue is React may group multiple setState calls into a single update for better performance. But in our scenario, all the 5 setState calls are done in a single go, because once the user clicks on click, we are calling the 5increment method. In the 5increment method, you have the increment method calling 5 times. So what you are doing is that all the 5 setState calls, because increment method have the setState method, all the 5 setState calls are done in single go, and an updated value does not carry over between the different calls. Suppose first time this dot increment, initially count value 0, then count value should become 1, then here count value should become 2, 3, 4, 5. But what is happening is that this updated value does not carry over between the different calls. So when you have to update the state based on the previous state, we need to pass a function as an argument to setState method. Let me modify the code. So if you observe, the setState method has the 2 parameters. The first parameter is the state object, and the second parameter is the callback function. So instead of passing an object, let me modify the code. So this dot setState, I will provide previous state, and that previous state value I will increment. So here let me modify the code. I will open the braces. I will provide PRV and state, and then I will use the arrow operator, open the braces, open the curly braces, and then I will use the count property, and then I will write previous state dot count plus 1 and then console.log this.state.count. So here what we are doing, instead of passing an object, I have used prev state, and the prev state value I have incremented by 1. Let me save this one, go to the browser and let me refresh it. Initially the count value is 0. Let me click on increment button. The count value is incremented by 5. Let me again click on the increment button. The count value is again incremented by 5. Let me again click on the increment. Again it is incremented by 5. So whenever I am clicking on the increment button, the count value is incremented by 5. That is what we want, right? So when you have to update state based on the previous state value, pass in a function as an argument instead of the regular setState object. The first one is always make use of setState and never modify the state directly. The second point you should remember is code has to be executed after the state has been updated. Place that code in the callback function, which is second parameter to the setState method. The third point to be remembered is whenever you have to update the state based on the previous state value, pass in a function as an argument instead of a regular object. I hope you have understood in detail about the setState method in React. If you still have any doubts related to this concept, feel free to ask me in the comment section. I will try to clear your doubts as early as possible. Thank you for watching the complete video. Have a nice day.